from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. While emerging market stocks inched up today to 3-month highs, they of course were boosted by cautious optimism about global trade developments. Now, a pretty positive day also across Africa's key markets. In South Africa, the oil share was up today, but we did see MTN sleeping almost 4% on the day. That's after announcing that its EBITDA did rise about 39.3% in the 9 months to end in September. Well, also coming up on the show today, the government purse is running dry in South Africa. Kenyan Parliament Committee eases its tough stance on interest rate caps. And China and the US trade talks remain on track. Well, let's start off today's show in South Africa, where Finance Minister Tito Mboweni has warned that the country is running broke. Growth has stunted and debt levels may reach 70% of GDP. While presenting his medium-term budget, the minister cut growth projections for 2019 to about 0.25% from 1.5%. The minister also announced tough austerity measures, which will cut government perks and extras scrapped. Now, the bleak economic outlook comes only days before Moody's Investment Service announces its rating review on South Africa. Well, let's take apart today's medium-term budget statement. We're joined by Sumitra Naidu in Johannesburg. Sumitra, always great to have you on the show. Now, we certainly expected a few tough revelations as well as decisions in today's budget speech. He did point to a darker picture in terms of the country's economic outlook. What are the top-line takeaways for you?
Well, Uche, we've been heading in this direction for quite a while now. There's been warnings for years now. But I think what really stood out today and what was really worrying and disappointing was the fact that the situation is that dire. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't realize how serious the situation is. So you mentioned the debt situation. That has been a major concern. And, the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, didn't hold back. He spoke about the seriousness of this and the fact that we currently sitting, our debt to GDP is currently sitting at 56.7%. Reaching 60% is a concern. And he also said, in the pre-budget briefing, that if we reach 100%, then we're in the hands of the IMF. And they're expecting, the projections say that the debt is going to reach 71.3% by 2022. 23. That's just about 3 years from now. It's very, very worrying. On top of that, there was the issue of tax revenues. The tax collection has been declining. Revenues, we have a 4% decline in revenues. We're sitting with a $3.5 billion hole in tax revenues. This also, is because of such a weak economy. And I think the other issue that came up today, which was a complete shocker as well, was the growth projection for 2019. So in February, when the minister delivered his budget speech, the projection for growth for 2019 was 1.5%. The Treasury reduced that to 0.5%. That in itself is so concerning that we're not even going to reach 1% for 2019. And we just saw unemployment figures come out yesterday, unemployment at an 11-year high. So if you put all of that together, unemployment is also going to rise, considering that this economy is so weak. The tax base is not growing because this economy is not growing either. And this debt burden has become such a big issue. If nothing is done urgently to arrest this rise in debt, then we're in even more problems than we are now.
Well, Sumitra, in his own words, he said the consequences of not acting now would be gravely negative. Did Mboweni outline a clear plan going forward, especially in terms of managing the government's debt levels, as well as additional measures to boost revenue, such as new taxes?
So, Uche, there are a number of proposals that are on the table. He said that the next 3 months would be used to negotiate structural reforms with the government, with the cabinet, to look at how they're actually going to implement these very urgently, so that by the time we get to the February budget 2020, we would have some of these things in place. But he also said that, you know, it requires buy-in. What was very interesting in the pre-budget briefing, he was saying that not everybody within the ANC actually understands the consequences of how severe this debt situation is. They were actually debating, you know, on the budget debate. They were actually asking, why can't we actually reach 100% like the US? And he says this is a huge concern. We don't have a currency reserve like the US does. It's not the same. South Africa is an open economy and we're a smaller economy. This can be disastrous. So he says he's not getting that kind of buy-in. Trying to convince them is another problem. So there are a number of measures that are in place and that they are going to put forward, and hopefully Parliament passes them. A lot of them are austerity measures. So there are going to be spending cuts. All of government departments are going to take cutbacks on spending, which means that there's going to be less or even no investment in infrastructure projects by the government. It might affect service delivery as well. There will also be cutbacks on all ministers' spending in terms of travel, the extra perks. None of them will be able to travel first class or business class anymore. They will now have to travel economy. All their expensive cars will be taken back and they will be given lower, cheaper models. So all of these are proposals that are on the table. Whether there's actually buy-in for that, it remains to be seen. Also on the issue of state-owned entities, he said that there will be no more money going to state-owned entities. Eskom, the big one, he said that there is no more money for Eskom. Now, considering that there's already been money allocated to Eskom over the next 3 years. There was another recent allocation made to them, and Mboweni said today that there will be no more money given to them. If any money is allocated to them in the future, it will be in the form of loans. They will need to pay it back, and they will need to pay it back with interest.
Well, many thanks, Sumitra, for that update. Sumitra Naidu joining us there in Johannesburg. Now, earlier on, Sumitra filed this story, which looks at the ease of doing business in the country right now. Take a look.
It takes up to 40 days to open up a business in South Africa, and still there's a number of other requirements to meet before you can actually start doing business. These delays are time-consuming and costly and are getting worse despite promises by the president to improve efficiencies.
The other one is around our trade, exporting and dealing with foreign countries. And both are critical for different reasons. The small business one, the ease of actually starting a business, it's quite important because small businesses, sometimes they may not necessarily enhance productivity, but they've got important distributional effects. They're very good at creating jobs, and they tend to be very good at directing money to the lower income end.
The moment we have government departments, right, where websites are down for days, we have many companies and businesses, who need to do business with government and cannot access government portals. This is very simple, and this is a micro example of the kind of problems you have. It takes you days and days standing in queues, and many times you leave these entities without getting issues resolved.
The World Bank report found that access to finance is still a problem.
Access to finance on the smaller business side is a bit of an issue. Banks have moved from small business loans more towards your personal loans and your micro loans. There's been a significant shift in that. I think the Reserve Bank is best placed to answer why it would practically allow the substitution of small business loans with micro loans. It's just something that's clearly ridiculous. It's difficult to understand.
Weak governance was also flagged in the report. South Africa has been riddled with corruption in recent years. There's several commissions of inquiry underway to deal with the problem, but no one is being held accountable.
Well, I think what would be of great use is if we start actually seeing prosecutions happening. You can't have scandal after scandal after scandal and there's no follow through. I think the government talks a good story. We just need to start seeing some action.
South Africa slipped 2 positions to 84 in the world rankings this year. The timing couldn't be worse. Unemployment is rising and growth is declining. South Africa needs to improve efficiencies, reduce the red tape and tackle corruption urgently in order to restore confidence. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's shift focus now to Zimbabwe. As the country struggles with a deepening economic crisis, Zimbabweans are now facing steep hikes in cell phone rates as well as fuel prices. Regulators in the country have announced a 12% increase in fuel prices. This is, of course, the second fuel price increase in Zimbabwe this month. Now, according to the government, the move has been driven by the weakening of the Zimbabwean dollar. A litre of petrol in Zimbabwe now retails at about $1.07. With a litre of diesel going for roughly $2. However, the hike has failed to ease nationwide shortages, with most of the fuel pumps in Harare still dry. At the same time, Zimbabwe's telecoms regulator has also approved a 95% increase in mobile tariffs across the board. The adjustment will see on-net calls per minute cost about 96 US cents. Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. And Uganda has ordered telecoms operators to list on the country's bourse. The decision is part of its strategy to encourage local ownership in the sector. Uganda's telecoms companies are nearly all foreign-owned. The firms, which include the local unit of South Africa's MTN Group, as well as the subsidiary of India's Bharti Airtel, now have about 2 years to list at least 20% of their shares. And German car maker Volkswagen has launched a pilot project in Rwanda to test the viability of electric cars in Africa. The project is a partnership between the automaker and German power equipment firm Siemens. It will see electric-powered versions of Volkswagen's Golf hatchback vehicles rolled out in the capital Kigali for a local ride-hailing service. Rwanda is the first African country where Volkswagen is testing electric cars. Meanwhile, Africa's largest oil refinery, Nigeria's Dangote, is set to deliver fuel to consumers by road and seaports. The refinery will also effectively replace all of Nigeria's fuel imports when fully operational. Dangote refinery is at the moment under construction in the commercial capital of Lagos. Once completed, the facility will process about 650,000 barrels of crude per day. And lastly, PSA, the owner of French car maker Peugeot, is in talks with Fiat Chrysler over a planned merger with the Italian-American group. If successful, the merger will create one of the world's leading automakers with shares worth more than $47 billion. Peugeot currently has a market value of about $26.2 billion, while Fiat Chrysler's sits at about $22 billion. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come. A Kenyan Parliament committee eases its tough stance on interest rate caps. And in Uganda, the government seeks to regulate the production and sale of coffee.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why.
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
An open platform to a market of close to 1.4 billion people. A new platform strengthening global economic cooperation. A progressive platform promoting innovative growth and inclusive development. Join CGTN and its integrated media teams as we take you to the second China International Import Expo in Shanghai. We'll show you how the expo reflects a new era of China's opening up, how it builds a shared future of global economic prosperity, and what this means for consumers, businesses, and policymakers. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, here in Kenya, a Parliament Finance Committee has backed plans to repeal a cap on commercial lending rates. Now, the committee backed down on its hard earlier stance after President Uhuru Kenyatta refused to sign the government's budget for this financial year. The government has been under pressure from the IMF as well as industry players to remove the caps on loans. President Kenyatta has asked the lawmakers to repeal the cap. Now, the regulation has been blamed for a slowdown in private sector credit growth. MPs now have the option of removing the cap from the bill or overruling the president if 2/3 of the House vote to override his position. Back in 2016, the government limited rates banks can charge customers to 4 percentage points above the central bank's benchmark. And still in Kenya, e-logistics company called Lorry Systems has officially announced its expansion to Nigeria in a bid to cement its footprint across Africa. Now, Lorry has completed a successful pilot in Nigeria with some of the country's top cargo companies. They include Olam, Honeywell Flour Mills, and Flour Mills Nigeria. This expansion presents a massive opportunity as the company seeks to use technology to cut costs in the logistics sector. Lorry, which is the largest e-logistics service provider in East Africa, the company's operations in the e-logistics sector and, of course, its plans for the rest of the continent. We're joined now by Uche Okoronkwo. She's Lorry Systems Chief Operating Officer. Great to have you on the show, my namesake. Now, let's talk about the company and its plans going forward. You've been in Kenya for about 4 years now. What has been your experience expanding into a market like Nigeria, especially where the inefficiencies in the logistics sector and the logistics chain are seemingly greater than this region?
Hey, thank you for having me, namesake, Uche. It's been an interesting journey here in Nigeria. Yes, indeed, it is a different market. And I think that just for us presents a bigger opportunity. It's been interesting trying to aggregate both the transporters and the cargo owners in Nigeria. It's a more cash-based economy than Kenya is. And so there are challenges around that, but that's where a platform like ours provides value to both the transporters and the cargo owners. And so all of the challenges that we've seen here present an even greater opportunity for Lorry with a platform that essentially looks to revolutionize the space.
Well, your firm is actually a part of a growing e-logistics and transport space in Africa. Give us a sense of the scale, the amount of investment, product offerings, as well as competition in the sector in Africa right now.
So the logistics space itself is, you see different numbers, but we think it's about 22 billion in size, right? So it's a massive opportunity. And for us, our goal is to essentially bring efficiency to that space with the aim of bringing the cost of moving goods down across the continent. From a scale perspective, we are now currently operating in across 9 countries, with presence in 5 of those countries. And so we are now in West Africa, present in 2 countries, Nigeria and Ghana, and then out of East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia, and moving to 4 other countries in the region. So we're growing quite aggressively. The goal is to become more Pan-African and have a presence in as many countries in in Africa, across the continent, and even frontier markets.
Well, a question for the industry is technology enough to fix Africa's logistics problems going forward? What are the main challenges that firms like yours think need urgent attention in the logistics ecosystem?
Sorry, I missed the question.
My question was, is technology enough to fix Africa's logistics problems? And what are the challenges for companies like yours that need urgent attention in the ecosystem?
So I will say that technology is not all that is required, but of course it brings not just discovery, but through that discovery, we're looking to bring efficiency, right? Logistics in Africa is a massive feat, and it requires an operational side of it as well. We are not naive about that, and we do have an operational angle to our business. But what we try to do is use technology to make those operations more efficient and to bring more visibility to both cargo owners and transporters, and thereby increase utility for the truck assets in the space. Because our view is that the problem is not necessarily a lack of adequate supply, but it's really about utility, discovery and utility. So we want to try and see if we can, our goal is to see if we can unlock what is probably about 10 to 20% utilization and increase that to about 80% to 90%, thereby multiplying the availability of assets by about 4 times. And so our platform enables discovery and utility for those assets, thereby reducing the gap between the demand and supply. So technology in and of itself is not the only problem, but then it does provide significant efficiency to the space, and that's what we're aimed to do.
Now, of course, an industry like yours will be critical to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which has now been ratified. How do you plan to lend your voice to that discussion? What are your plans to ensure that you're at the forefront of its implementation? And what policy do you think that policy changes do you think we need to see in order for it to work going forward?
Yes, so we are probably one of the companies that sits on the largest amount of data in the logistics space on the continent. And our goal is to provide insight to the government, or to governments across the continent, using that data to drive policy decisions. And so that's a role that we want, that's a critical role that we want to play in all of the countries that we operate in and all of the countries that we seek to operate in. So we see ourselves as the provider of information, data, and to essentially enable data-driven policies and decisions.
Quite interesting. Well, many thanks for joining us in the studio. Great to have you. Of course, that was Uche Okoronkwo. She is the Lorry Systems Chief Operating Officer, joining us there in Lagos. Well, let's shift our focus now to Uganda. The country is becoming a better place to do business. That's according to the World Bank's 2020 Ease of Doing Business survey. It attributes this progress to the development of the country's infrastructure. Now, the Ease of Doing Business study ranks about 190 countries. Here's CGTN's Michael Baleke reporting.
Uganda jumped 11 places to position 116 in the World Bank's ranking for doing business. The improvement is partly attributed to the country's development of its road network and electricity supply, and that's been noticed by entrepreneurs here.
Cost of doing business is coming down in Uganda. Before, in the last 10 years, we hardly had any roads across the country. Today, from any part of Kampala, you can go in any direction. 1 hour, you should be at the border. Beautiful roads, well-maintained. They are a lot better than some of the neighboring countries. That's the main thing, number one, roads. Number two, electricity. We never had an excess of supply over demand like we have today. In fact, next year we're going to have 3 times what we demand as excess supply.
Uganda is upgrading its power infrastructure and has streamlined the process of getting connected to the grid. The government has also simplified requirements for investors to access land, improved water supply, and expanded its tax payment solutions. But the business community says there is still much to do.
We've had wonderful rains, predictable rains. They have been a bit longer than usual, but we're going to have a good harvest. So there shouldn't be food inflation. So when the cost of food is low, the cost of moving goods is stable, price of fuel has not gone up considerably. So it shouldn't be a bad story about Uganda. What is lacking is our skills, our bureaucracy, a bit of pockets of corruption.
The World Bank Ease of Doing Business report is an annual survey which measures aspects of business regulation affecting small and medium-sized domestic firms in an economy. The survey is based on factors including the ease of starting a business, obtaining construction permits, access to electricity, registering property, access to credit, and trading across borders. The Ease of Doing Business ranking 2020 puts Uganda in position 12 in sub-Saharan Africa. But economic analysts argue Uganda is still lagging behind top performers like Mauritius, Rwanda, Kenya, and South Africa because the pace of embracing modern technologies that make it easy for entrepreneurs to do business is slow. According to the World Bank, all the top-ranking countries have adopted the use of electronic systems to facilitate trade.
The world is evolving into a digital era, and we need to that an investor has to only just can do what they call the one-stop center, submit his documents online, register online, pay fees online, gets accredited online, and then gets a license online. That is being done in Rwanda. In Uganda, we are still into the the traditional mode of physical presence and all that.
However, Uganda is pushing to triple its power generation capacity, build more roads, and develop more industries, a move the government believes will attract foreign investments, create jobs, and expand the country's tax base. Michael Balekes, GTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, staying in Uganda, the government the government has finally tabled a bill in Parliament that seeks to regulate the country's coffee sector. Now, the move is aimed at boosting coffee production in the country. The East African nation, which is also the continent's largest coffee exporter, is also pushing farmers now to expand their acreage and replace aging unproductive trees with new seedlings. But not all farmers in the country are happy with the proposed law. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
Maureen Mugaga grows coffee in Wakiso district, central Uganda. She's been cultivating the crop for the last 17 years, but says her earnings have significantly dropped in recent years. Changing weather patterns, partly linked to global climate changes, and a drop in price on global markets has affected production over the years.
Coffee farming used to help families find livelihood. It was village business. It provided salt, paraffin, and even school fees. It was very reliable in the past, but not as much today. In the past, it was very valuable to grow coffee. Coffee-growing families were very wealthy.
Uganda is Africa's largest coffee exporter, followed by Ethiopia. The country mainly cultivates Robusta coffee. The government has been pursuing a planting program lately to drive up exports, with farmers given free seeds to expand their acreage and replace aging, unproductive trees. Now, the government is seeking to regulate coffee in the country in a bid to improve production in the sector. It's tabled the National Coffee Bill 2018 to effect this. The government wants farmers to register with the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, among other provisions, to improve planning and coffee traceability, as well as services for farmers. Maureen is among a group of farmers who feel this will interfere with their business.
This bill on coffee growing, licensing and registration, when we look at it keenly for us as coffee farmers, we did not find these laws growing up in families that cultivated coffee. Our fathers grew coffee, dried it, and their trade helped them fight poverty. But if all farmers must be registered to grow coffee, then we, the new ones in the sector, get scared even before we benefit. We don't know what this law is intended to do after registration.
For others, the brewing controversy is just politics.
These regulations are not bad, but they have been politicized, which affects the farmers. It's not right to even go to the extent of declaring the size of the farm. Laws are good because they are needed today. Farmers are wrongly harvesting coffee. It's true, farmers should not harvest premature seeds. Regulators should be able to advise farmers to harvest ripe red seeds only. Also, when you dry red seeds, then the grade will be competitive.
Some experts have also expressed concern over various clauses in the bill. These include one that attracts penalties for farmers who violate the new law. Farmers who neglect their coffee plantations, for example, are liable to a 2-year sentence or a stipulated fine, according to the proposed bill.
The Western consumers, especially the sophisticated, are becoming quite particular. They want to know that this coffee we are consuming is not being produced by child labor. They want to know that it is not being produced by using harmful chemicals. They want to know that this coffee is not being grown by destroying the environment. That means they want to know that this coffee comes from Elgon, from this specific farmer. And to do that, you need to know these farmers. To know them, you have to register them, which is basically capturing them in a database.
Uganda predicts its coffee exports in the 2019-2020 crop year will be about 16% higher from the previous period. This will be a result of favorable weather and expanding acreage as new trees mature. The country is also planning to introduce a coffee auction system that will allow farmers bid directly with buyers instead of relying on traders to market their coffee. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And moving on now, several companies from Rwanda have confirmed participation at the upcoming 2019 China International Import Expo in Shanghai. Now, the firms view the event as a golden opportunity to showcase the array of their exports and, of course, an array of their exports as well as the lucrative Chinese market. With the details, here's CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar.
2019 will be the second year Diego participates in the expo. Scenes from last year's successful exhibition are still fresh in Diego's mind.
The last China Import Expo took place in Shanghai in November 2018. It opened us so many opportunity because we saw another world of opportunity. Because we've been also selling to Europe and India. We didn't know about Chinese market. For us, we see that there's another big market to consider. And for us, we were lucky because when we attend that exhibition, we've managed to get a big contract to export chili oil to China. The value was about $2 million US. And it shows like how China market is big and it can benefit for us.
A total of 172 countries, ranging from international organizations to enterprises, were at the first CIIE in November last year. The event opened up vast opportunities to Rwandan farms. The platform paved the way for an array of Rwandan products to be showcased at the lucrative Chinese market.
Signing that first contract, because I saw the opportunity in Chinese market, I went back in some other exhibition and I've gotten so many other opportunities.
At the moment, Rwanda's trade focused with the world's second biggest economy is at a solid growth. To take advantage of this, a handful of Rwandan farms are eyeing to seal export deals with major trade partners such as Alibaba.
The difference of Chinese market with other markets we've been supplying to is that they buy so much volume. If they import, for example, for a big volume from a country, that's beneficial to the whole nation. Because if you, for example, they are importing my chili, I will give so many contracts to many outgrowers. So it will impact a large number of farmers because we'll be ensured of the market. I think that is a good policy because they're going to empower African countries to increase their export. Yeah, because China is a big market for African countries.
Coffee, tea, flowers and avocados are just some of the African farm produce that will be marketed at the second edition of the CIIE in Shanghai. Over 3,000 enterprises from about 150 countries and regions will be at the week-long expo. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a quick break now, but coming up on the show. China and U.S. trade talks remain on track. And millennials in America are in deep debt.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Let's recap today's top headlines now. In Cameroon, at least 42 bodies have been recovered from a landslide in Bafoussam city. According to Cameroon's state media, 4 pregnant women were amongst the victims. Torrential rains over the past few days caused a hill to collapse, resulting in the landslide. Now, rescue teams are still digging at the site with the hope of finding survivors. And in South Sudan, the main opposition leader, Riek Machar, is calling for a 6-month delay in the formation of a unity government. The original deadline was set for November 12th this year. While a ceasefire between the signatories continues to hold, both sides still disagree on the details of the deal, including the number of states South Sudan should have. And Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has met with South African Deputy President David Mabuza in Beijing. The leaders hope to promote bilateral relations for new development in their countries. Li says China is ready to work with South Africa to consolidate mutual political trust as well as promote a practical cooperation. And at least 18 people have died within the past 1 month in Katsina State, northwest of Nigeria. Health officials suspect the deaths are as a result of a yellow fever outbreak. Samples have been collected and taken to laboratories in Abuja and Lagos to confirm whether it is yellow fever. The outbreak was reported between September and October this year. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, on the international front, China's foreign ministry says that American and Chinese negotiators will speak again soon. Now, according to the ministry spokesperson, the two sides have made substantial progress in some of the consultations on a trade agreement. The sentiment follows a comment from a U.S. official stating that the interim trade agreement between the world's top 2 economies might not be completed in time for signing in Chile next month as expected. Well, in the meantime, the ongoing trade friction between China and the U.S. continues to hurt American businesses. 3M has cut its full-year sales forecast to -1 or 1.5%. Now, overall, the firm's sales in Asia-Pacific, which is its biggest market outside the U.S., fell about 5%. 3M's adjusted sales also dropped 1.1%, coming in below market expectations. At the same time, American chipmaker Texas Instruments has reported $3.8 billion in its third quarter earnings, down 11% compared to last year's. Now, staying with the trade dispute, it's harvest season for many American farmers. However, due to uncertainty, prices of many crops are down, affecting thousands of farmers across the world's biggest economy. Now, from the U.S. state of Colorado, here's CGTN's Hendrik Sybrandy with this story.
Crop this year has been pretty good, really.
Keith Amon farms corn near Alt, Colorado. Been farming with his family for 50 years now. The other day, he was doing some fall tillage, preparing the ground for next year's crop. These are tough times for Amon and many of his neighbors.
It seems like all agricultural products are interrelated, and when you have a negative effect on one product, especially soybeans, it will have a negative impact on corn as well.
China's 25% tariff on U.S. soybeans has helped push commodity prices down across the board. Corn, which reached a high of $8 a bushel back in 2012, is $3.88 now.
If you're selling a corn crop for $3.50 a bushel, $4 a bushel, it's not going to pay a lot amount of bills.
Tim Magnuson, who farms nearby, says he's learned to adapt to those lower prices.
You tighten the belt a little bit and hope for the best. Of course, everybody wants more for their product, but sometimes you don't get it.
Corn yields have gone up over the years thanks to improved technology and farming practices. So in a way, folks like Magnuson are a victim of their own success. One major worry for corn farmers is that corn becomes even more abundant and prices fall even further as more soybean farmers switch over to their crop.
I've heard as much as 25 to 30% in certain locations.
Dale McCall runs the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. He thinks trade tensions with China, Canada, and Mexico may be hurting farmers most of all.
The longer these trade wars go on, the more uncertain it becomes. And right now it impacts what you're going to plant. It impacts whether or not you're going to get an operating loan.
Farmers differ on whether those trade disputes will lead to better times down the road.
We hope that it's 25, 30 years of good working relationships with China. And there'll be a cost with that, no pain, but we're willing to go through that.
But to use agriculture and farmers as pawns isn't something that people in Washington should be doing.
Low prices may prompt Amon to store his corn this winter in the hopes he can sell at a higher price next year, an option he says many younger farmers don't have. He's calm about the situation on the outside.
Well, there's definitely turmoil that you're not seeing.
But it's part of the landscape of American agriculture that's always been unpredictable, even more so today. Hendrik Sybrandy, CGTN, Alt, Colorado.
And let's head to Saudi Arabia now, where it is the second day of the Future Investment Initiative, which is dubbed the Davos in the Desert. Top finance moguls and political leaders are at the investment summit. On Tuesday, memorandums of understanding were signed on $15 billion in foreign investment deals. Now, the deals represent the scale and diversity of the kingdom's economy. Last year, deals worth about $55 billion were signed. Riyadh has been struggling to attract foreign investment, and its economy remains heavily reliant on oil. The leadership under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has rolled out reforms in order to diversify the economy. Well, staying with that summit, Saudi Arabia's energy minister has said the timing of the highly anticipated stock market debut of Saudi energy colossus Aramco will be dictated by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Just before the summit, the prince said the IPO will be coming soon. He added that Saudi Arabia has the potential to become the most reliable supplier of solar energy. Now, Aramco was expected to launch the first part of a two-stage IPO earlier in October, but the process has been delayed. The Crown Prince is said to be unhappy with the valuation of the firm. Early estimates had put it at about $2 trillion, but state media has hinted that the long-awaited IPO will now happen on December 11th. And moving on, the stagnant U.S. consumer confidence in May may have something to do with the financial situation of American millennials. A recent report by Deloitte finds that U.S. millennials, defined as people between the ages of 18 and 35, are falling behind previous generations when it comes to their net worth. Well, here's CGTN's Karina Huber explaining.
30-year-old Molly Seeley is a software developer in New York. She makes good money, but her financial situation isn't good.
I will be definitely probably in debt for the next decade or so, and that definitely changes how I make decisions in life.
Seeley pays $1,700 a month in student debt that currently tops $120,000. She also faces high living costs, making it very hard to save. She's not alone.
According to global financial firm Deloitte, Americans between the ages of 18 and 35 have an average net worth that is below $8,000. That is a lot less than generations past had at the same age.
Researchers at Deloitte say it's an almost 35% drop since 1996.
Income has been slowing and pretty stagnant for those in the middle and low income, which millennials tend to fall into. On the other side of the coin, non-discretionary costs have changed dramatically. So things like healthcare, which has increased by around 20%, and education, which has increased by over 60%, are a real strain for young American consumers.
That strain is causing many young people to delay reaching milestones like buying a home, getting married, and having children.
Sometimes they do say that they are delaying having children, or they've decided to not have children at all because of the student loan debt problem.
Stevens says this has a big impact on the U.S. economy, which is dominated by consumer spending.
You have a lot of retailers and consumer products companies who rely on those large events and that predictable spend that comes with such an important life event.
Lori Donovan, a financial advisor who works predominantly with millennials, says many of her clients lie awake at night stressing about their financial situation.
My heart breaks for those individuals because they are hard workers. They're doing a lot of the right things. Their priorities are aligned in the way a lot of other Americans' priorities are, and they just are consumed by the burden of student loans.
For Seeley, the biggest worry is figuring out how she's going to take care of her aging mother.
If she needs an in-home healthcare aid, she can't afford that, and I can't afford that right now. So, yeah, and those are things that's probably the thing that's kind of barreling the most down, in terms of the financial situation, is being able to provide for her.
Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
Now, Hong Kong's economy has been adversely affected by the social unrest underway in the city and U.S.-China trade war. Now, can it remain a significant global trade center in the long haul? Well, here's CGTN's Gay Yun-Fei finding out more.
Hong Kong's economy is sliding into a technical recession. The city's GDP growth is facing negative growth for 2019. Chief Executive Carrie Lam expressed her concerns over the situation at the Future of Trade conference on Wednesday, held by Asia House, a think tank.
As uncertainties in the external environment will likely persist for some time, the near-term outlook remains dismal. It is a distressing time for Hong Kong trade and business, equally so for the community at large, for the Hong Kong SAR government, and for myself.
She added that in terms of trade for the first 9 months of 2019 as a whole, the value of total exports of goods dropped by 4.6% over the same period in 2018. Hong Kong's future is facing mounting uncertainty, especially when the city's ongoing social unrest coincides with the US-China trade war. As the city is entering into a technical recession, will Hong Kong's special role as a global trade center be shaken?
Ladies and gentlemen, despite our deeply concerning community issues and the rather negative perception of Hong Kong overseas as we have been unfairly portrayed, let me end by emphatically saying that Hong Kong will continue to play a pivotal role in global trade, and my government will double our efforts to reconnect.
That would be a positive first step to try to reestablish progress in resolving what are ultimately very fundamental differences in approach and different objectives for both China and the U.S. and then further trade discussions. Hong Kong has the resilience to continue to thrive and indeed have certain attributes and assets as a trading hub that do not go away even with the current challenges.
Experts say the special role of Hong Kong as a global trade center will not be challenged in the short term, as long as it remains China's gateway to the world. Liu Yunfei, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Well, let's now take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices falling as worries over a possible delay in resolving that US-China trade war, which of course has hurt global oil demand, competed with a drop in US crude inventories, which of course has helped to boost prices. Meanwhile, gold prices firmed up today as a possible delay in that trade deal stalled a rally in equities. Investors, of course, have shifted their focus to a US Fed meeting. Well, let's take a quick break. Still to come. A Nigerian entrepreneur targets the global market with unique children wear. Let's go to Nigeria now, where an entrepreneur is making waves in the country's fashion industry by creatively turning cheap African prints into unique designs strictly for children. Cynthia Oguntoye says her aim is to help the West African oil producer make a mark on the global fashion scene. With a story, here's CGTN's Phil Ihaza.
This luxury dress, made with a blend of African prints and Western designs, is one made by Cynthia Oguntoye, the founder of Maison Lulubelle in Abuja. Cynthia says she started making these unique collection of children's clothes in 2015 because they were rare to find.
At the time, Afrocentric kids fashion was looked at as something for the less privileged, for people that couldn't afford to buy Western fashion for their kids. So that really bothered me, not being able to have anywhere that I could walk into and just say, you know what, I want to pick up something for my child. And that was how the idea came to be.
The African Development Bank says Africa only accounts for less than 5% of the $2.4 trillion worth of the global fashion industry. Cynthia believes she can help increase that number with a unique collection of vibrant color prints and patterns. Although the demand for Afrocentric kids clothing in Nigeria is growing, Cynthia says the business is still dealing with underlying problems.
One of the major challenges that we have is that of perception, just getting people to accept African kids fashion even here in Africa. We also have major issues with power supply, electricity. That is a constant challenge for us. And of course, there are issues around logistical issues, being able to get things to our customers and all that. And on the international stage, we have challenges just breaking into the international market.
Against the odds, some of these collections made it to this year's London Kids Fashion Week in February.
Entrepreneurs like Cynthia are hoping that exporting these African prints on a global scale could transform the country's fashion industry.
Here in Abuja, Cynthia is drawing in the customers, and she hopes to see her unique brand of children's clothing in shops around the world in the near future. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And heading further into northern Nigeria now, the region boasts of a huge number of fish farmers, but none are into tilapia fish farming, and that's because many of them consider it quite difficult. However, one retired civil servant in the northern state of Nasarawa is trying to change all of that. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with his story.
This is the very first functional tilapia fish hatchery in northern Nigeria.
It's pioneered by this man, a retired civil servant.
What we have here is the incubation system. And you can see some eggs here. And when eggs are collected from the mouth of the fish, tilapia are mouth-brooding fish. So we go to the brooding section and we get them, and we physically collect the eggs from the mouth. And we bring them here. So we stimulate the mother's mouth here until the eggs are hatched.
It's a complex but fascinating process. Hassan Mundu and his team are operating in a region of Nigeria known more for catfish farming, while tilapia fish is imported. It's that importation that Mundu is aiming to stop by getting fish farmers in the region to take to tilapia fish farming.
In fact, almost all farmers we have in the country are catfish farmers. So we are sensitizing them to breed tilapia. Everybody knows about tilapia, but when it comes to farming it, they don't know. So that is what we are doing. That's the sacrifice we are making.
At the very heart of the operation of Mundu's tilapia fish farm, especially the hatchery, is power. Without constant and uninterrupted electricity supply, it would be impossible to run the hatchery. And that's where the services of Jamada Vawa comes in. He runs a solar startup known as Solar Boss. His solar farm did not only install the solar system that drives Mundu's fish farm, it also installs the entire water reticulation system for the hatchery.
The whole hatchery production line has to have a continuous flow of water, and water is life, so that actually brought my interest into it. And a lot of farms these days are trying to go into renewable energy, trying to see how the reticulation system works for their own farms.
We cannot use the electricity because it's too expensive and it's erratic. So we opted for the solar system, and it's been working for us. The circulatory system is working fine, and we try to apply it not only in the hatchery, but also at the outgrower system.
It's a partnership that is producing positive results and keeping the fish farm in operation. And on the marketing front, Mundu says his initiative is beginning to gain traction, with his farm doing an average of 100,000 eggs per month.
By the time you come here in the next 2 years, you'll see that people will no longer be testing, people will be breeding tilapia. We have a lot of potential to do fish culture in the country, and we also have the market. So it would not be nice for us, with the size of the market we have, to be importing fish.
Nigeria imports an estimated 3.32 million metric tons of fish every year, something the government is doing everything to stop by encouraging local fish farming. Mundu says he hopes the government also patronizes fish farmers like him for fish seeds to replenish the fish stock in the country's water bodies. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Nasarawa State, Nigeria.
Well, before we go, a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand weakening almost 3%, and that's after investors responded to, or rather traders say, investors responded to Finance Minister Tito Mboweni saying the budget deficit is set to be 2 percentage points higher on average over the next 3 years. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling edging up on the back of increased inflows into the local debt market from investors abroad. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and of course the rest of the team, thanks for watching.